Hello. Thank you for listening to 3 Legacies Recovery Recordings. If you enjoy our program, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to share with a friend. We're also self-supporting, so feel free to contribute to the channel through Venmo at Recovery Recordings 615. Please note that the views expressed on this podcast are solely our individual views and do not represent any official stance of any 12-step program. We are not affiliated with any specific recovery organization, and this content should not be considered as professional advice for alcoholism or addiction.
Hello everyone, welcome to 3 Legacies Recovery Recordings. I'm your host Paul and I'm an alcoholic. Today is Tuesday, March 18th, 2025, and this is episode 20. It's hard to believe makes the episode 20. It seems like it was just a couple weeks ago when we started all this. I want to thank all the listeners and the supporters, all the emails we've been getting. We've been getting a lot of great comments. People have sent several talks in or several suggestions on different podcast episodes, and for the listeners, our email address is recoveryrecordings615@yahoo.com. We're also on several of the major platforms, streaming platforms. We're on Audible, Spotify, iHeartRadio, several other ones. And super excited about tonight's episode. We have Chris S. from New Jersey. How's it going, buddy?
It's going great, Paul. It's going great. Really enjoyed doing this series with you.
Yeah, man, it's been fun. I've had a lot of good feedback, too. Super excited about tonight, Step 11 for everyone. Step 11 is one of my favorites.
Absolutely, me too.
I'll tell you an interesting thing about it for me. I remember probably about 90 days in, I started getting into different forms of meditation, and it was one of the only reliefs I could get at the time, and it was just a life-changing experience for me, and so I'm just excited to hear, some of your experience with this step. Yeah.
Sure, absolutely. When I'm thinking step 11, I think is the broadening, deepening, and growing step. It is the expanding my spiritual life step, and step 10 is staying really current and really mindful, and step 11 it takes you to the next place in the spiritual life. So I'm really excited about talking about it because like you, it's one of my favorite steps.
Yeah, and there's quite a bit of work as far as in the book. It gives you a decent amount of directions in the 11th step. And
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start in a kind of unorthodox way. This particular step says that we are to we're to read books. We're to ask people for recommendations on spiritual literature, and spiritual literature is a way to grow, a way to broaden and deepen our spiritual perspective. And there's a book that I read this year that was really impactful for me. It's called God the Bestseller. And I'm going to tell you quickly the story of this book and why it's really important and why I'm even talking about it in an 11-step meeting, on an 11-step talk. So there was this book dealer, and the book dealer he basically made his living by finding high-end book collections and then buying those collections and then selling them for a profit. So he was a high-end book dealer. And there was a family on Cape Cod who was calling him up forever, saying, "Hey, you got to come up here. You got to check out these books." And it was kind of a haul for him, So he put it off. Finally, one day, okay, I'm going to go up there and I'm going to check out these books. And he walks into this house, and his mind is blown. He's looking at this collection of books. It is probably the most significant collection of religious and spiritual books he's ever seen, and they're all first edition, and they're all signed by the author. His mind is blown. He's like, who lived here? Now the person that lived there was a man named Axman.
Hmm.
And what Axman did from 1925 to 1965, what he was the senior religious editor at Harper's Publishing.
Nice.
So he starts digging in, and the family invites him in and says, go through the personal effects. There's all letters. This guy said, Uncle, whatever, Eugene, saved everything. Go through everything that you feel like going through. So he spent a lot of time there, and he found out that this guy Axman, because he was the senior publisher of religious work at, quite possibly the largest publishing house in the country, he influenced our spiritual perspective, and certainly in America, maybe even the world, just because he was the one that was picking the authors. He was the one that was, finalizing all the editing, and some of the people that he promoted, everyone would know. Okay, Martin Luther King Jr. Was one of them. Dorothy Day, Albert Schweitzer, Aldous Huxley. I mean, I could go on and on and on with these authors, and these authors really shaped not necessarily specifically religion, but they shaped our spiritual perspective. And this guy Axman was deeply, deeply interested and was promoting, comparative religion and spirituality in a really big way.
Nice.
And he starts, this guy that's up there, going through all this stuff, starts to find a lot of stuff from about Bill Wilson. And he finds out that this guy Axman was really, really close to Bill Wilson. And then he starts digging into personal letters and diaries and all this stuff. And he finds out that Bill Wilson was connected at the hip to this guy. He was doing, spiritual retreats with him. They were trading books. They were getting together. This is the individual who, in the 50s, experimented with LSD with Bill Wilson as an additional spiritual device to try to gain even deeper consciousness.
Yeah.
And he starts finding all this stuff. Now, none of this stuff is in the AA archives. It was all at Axman's house. Now, to make a long story short, why I'm even talking about this is this. Bill Wilson was surrounded by the absolute pinnacle of spiritual development from, say, 45 to 70 when he died. Axman was the guy who ultimately finished off the editing on the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. Nice. And AA Comes of Age.
Wow.
And, because he was Bill's friend, he didn't publish it with Harper's. He said, Bill, you go ahead and publish it with Works Publishing. So I didn't know that until I read this book, God, the Bestseller.
Nice.
But Bill Wilson himself was deeply involved in deep spiritual work. He was a seeker among seekers, and I wanted to share that story before we move into step 11, because I think it has a lot to do with the perspective of step 11, which really is starting the day in a very spiritual way, connected to God consciousness, approaching the day in a spiritually connected way through God consciousness, and a very, very constructive review at the end of the day to see how well we've done and what can we do better, and what are some of the areas where we may need to continue to focus on. So, I mean, think about how productive that is. Think about it as an action plan for deep spiritual growth. Yeah. And that really is what step 11 is, Paul.
That's good stuff. And it's funny because I was just, when you said Harper, I'm a big Audible guy. I like listening to a lot of audio books, but a lot of my favorite books was from Harper, right? And it was they have so much, such a vast collection of spiritual literature. It's good stuff. I also I like the whole vision thing. And so someone had mentioned to me the other day, I need to go back and look, but someone had mentioned whenever when we retire at night, in the original manuscript, do you know if that said was that something that Bill did in the morning? Have you heard anything about that?
I'm not really remembering any of that. I'm familiar with the original manuscript, but I'm much more familiar with the finalized text.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, it's cool to have a vision from what we just went through. We do this nightly review, to see how the day went, to try to align our will with God's, right? And then we have that great tool for our, on awakening. Let us think about the 24 hours ahead. We review our plans, right? It's such a great tool to have. Yeah.
Yeah, it absolutely is. So also one thing to note now, Axman also, pushed Yogananda and a lot of the Eastern philosophies and religious traditions. He also was a great purveyor of all of that stuff, whatever was really good and really deep.
Yeah.
So you can count on Bill being familiar with a lot of that stuff.
Nice.
But when the book Alcoholics Anonymous was written, this was prior to any exposure really to the Eastern traditions. Now when I say meditation, what's going to pop into a lot of people's heads is going to be like an Eastern perspective on meditation.
Yeah.
And that's because of the Beatles.
Yeah.
The Beatles brought the Maharishi over,
mm-hmm.
and everybody started doing transcendental meditation in 1968, and so our whole perspective on meditation has been colored by these Eastern traditions. But that's not what Bill is talking about in the 11th step. Bill is specifically talking about a Christian contemplative process.
Yeah.
It's really more of a contemplative process than it is what we would consider today meditation.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to understand that, because if you tell somebody you're going to need to pray and you're going to need to meditate, they think that they need to go get candles.
Yeah.
And they need to get a statue of the Buddha.
Yeah.
And hang tapestries. That's not what Bill was talking about. Bill was talking about a very, very practical approach that he had learned in the Oxford group.
Yeah.
And if you want, we'll start to go through some of that.
Yes, sir.
All right. So the very bottom of page 85, it says step 11 suggests prayer meditation. We shouldn't be shy on this matter. Better people than us are using it constantly. It works if we've got the proper attitude to work at it. Now he starts with returning at night, and it's funny. Everybody's always, why did he start at night? Why didn't he start during the day? And or in the morning? Why didn't he start with morning upon awakening? I think it's because you're reading this, and the first thing you're going to do after you read it is retire at night. So he starts there. That's my only explanation.
Yeah.
But he says we constructively review the day. Were we resentful, selfish, dishonest, or afraid? We saw those last week in step 10. Do we owe an apology? Have we kept something to ourselves which should be discussed with another person at once? Really, this is a spot check of how are we doing with the step process, the manifestations of self that we've agreed to feed us. How are we doing with that? Now, that doesn't sound like meditation where you sit in a lotus position and chant Om, does it?
No. No. It's kind of like how you use the word contemplation. That's better.
Yeah, it really is. Were we kind and loving toward all? What could we have done better?
Yeah.
Were we thinking of ourselves most of the time, or were we thinking of what we could do for others, of what we could pack into the stream of life? So these are all guides. These are all ways to guide our evening review. And And really what we need to do is we need to be really, really positive about this. This is constructive. Yes, we're asking ourselves where we've fallen short, but we're doing so in a very, very constructive manner.
Yeah.
We're doing so that we're growing away from these grosser handicaps, these defects of character. You know what I mean?
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
So it says, after making our review, we ask God's forgiveness and inquire what corrective measures should be taken. And we've already talked about when it says we ask God's, so many people think, well, that's what they must have done back in the 30s. No, you need to ask God's forgiveness and inquire what corrective measures should be taken. That's how you work this step. If you want to be one of the rarely have we seen a person fail who's thoroughly followed our path, be specific about what thoroughly following the path is. And when he's saying we did this and we did that, that's part of following the path. Would you agree with that, Paul?
Absolutely. Yeah. I tell you, let me add this. I love how Bill always, like all through the book, he always brings us back to our focus. Like on this, for example, it being a constructive review, right? And if you notice when he says, be careful not to drift into worry, remorse, or morbid reflection, and then he goes back to our focus, which is where it would diminish our usefulness to others, right? And he also does that, like in how it works on the forgiveness prayer, when he said, we avoid retaliation or argument, we wouldn't treat sick people that way. It would destroy our chances of being helpful. I love how he always takes it back to what our purpose is, right?
Yeah, yes, in a very, very positive way. We're fitting ourselves to be of maximum service to God and our fellow man.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of all this.
Yeah.
And when you start to recognize that you're really being of service in a lot of ways in your life, that's a mile marker on the spiritual trail. It really is.
Yeah.
All right, so that's a paragraph on retiring at night. Let's look at on awakening. On awakening, let's think about the 24 hours ahead. We consider our plans for the day. Before we begin, we ask God to direct our thinking, especially asking that it be divorced from self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives. So when it says we ask God, you ask God to direct your thinking, especially asking that it be divorced from self-pity and dishonest and self-seeking motives. Now we consider our plans for the day. Now, this is written in, say, 1939, okay? Meditation, the Western form of meditation, had many different aspects. Here's a form of meditation. Let's say you have a board meeting, tonight, and you're going to have to go over 4 or 5 topics. You think about those 4 or 5 topics and you plan how you're going to approach those topics. Yeah. That would be considered a meditation in 1939.
Yeah.
Consider a general who knows a battle is going to take place on a battlefield as soon as the sun rises the next day. He will go out and he will survey the battlefield, and he will try to think of all the different scenarios. If they attack from here, if they attack from there, if they try to flank us, he will try to come up with responses that are going to be adequate for a successful battle. That would be considered meditating the battlefield.
Yeah.
So again, you want to, in the morning, you want to meditate your battlefield. What's going to happen? Who do you have to meet? What are some of your commitments? What are some of the things you plan on accomplishing? And we're supposed to think about those and ask God for help. Ask God for the strength and the inspiration to be able to handle it all to the best of our ability. That is really constructive.
Amen.
Yeah. I think sitting in a lotus position chanting Om is not very productive. It may bring you into a really wonderful state of consciousness, but that's not helping anybody but you. This whole program is about being able to help others. So this type of practice really seems to make sense.
Yeah. We had looked up in my home group. We have a 19. It's either 838 or 39 dictionary, and it said to the meditation or meditate meant it said to thoughtfully ponder, which is exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Why go into the day unprepared
Yeah.
for constructive action?
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't sound great. So, in thinking about our day, we may face indecision. We may not be able to determine which course to take. Here, we ask God for inspiration and intuitive thought or decision. We relax and take it easy. We're often surprised how the right answers come after we've tried this for a while. So, one of the practices the Oxford Group had, and really what he's talking about here is morning quiet time. One of the practices was some people will consider it two-way prayer. Some people will consider it a contemplative exercise. But really waiting for an inspired thought, waiting for an intuitive thought about how to handle situations that may baffle us. If we face any kind of indecision, we don't just do something, stand there.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, how often did we just go into reaction mode and we would, do the wrong thing or say the wrong thing?
Absolutely. All the
How
time.
how often did that happen?
Yeah. All day.
All day, right? So it says here, what used to be a hunch or an occasional inspiration gradually becomes a working part of the mind. He is telling us that we are going to be improving our God consciousness. And with God consciousness comes the security that comes with a new manager. We are not managing our life anymore the way we used to. It's more under God management because we're practicing these spiritual principles. We usually conclude the period of meditation with a prayer that we be shown all through the day what our next step is to be, that we be given whatever we need to take care of such problems. We ask especially for freedom from self-will and are careful to make no requests for ourselves only. If circumstance warrant, we ask our wives or friends to join us in morning meditation. They did that in the Oxford Group. So this is a holdover from the Oxford Group. I'm not saying AA members don't do that, don't do their morning meditations and prayers with people. I know plenty of people that do, but probably the majority of us, this is a solo practice today.
Yeah, same.
If we belong to a religious denomination which requires a definite morning devotion, we attend to that also. So as we go through the day, we pause when agitated or doubtful, asking for the right thought or action. We constantly remind ourselves we're no longer running the show, humbly saying to ourselves many times each day, thy will be done. These are thoughts that must go with us constantly. We remember that from last week. These are thoughts that must go with us constantly. My sponsor has me doing a practice, two practices. One of them is tell myself what I'm doing, and the other is ask God for help with whatever I'm doing. Try to stay in the consciousness of the presence of God.
That's good.
God consciousness they're talking about in this step. And it will come if we practice these things. Yeah. These are spiritual practices that go back to St. Augustine. They go back 900 years or 1900 years or something.
Yeah, well, let me ask you a question. So when you said that, tell yourself what you're doing, like, what do you mean, like throughout the day, or like as to get your day rolling? Okay, so throughout the day, kind of like being mindful of what's going on and asking God for help, right?
I'm not perfect at it. I don't remember to do it all the time.
Sure, yeah.
But I am on a podcast with my friend Paul right now.
Amen.
God help me do a good job with this podcast.
Yeah.
Thoughts like that go with you constantly put you in the presence of God.
Yeah.
They put you in the spiritual climate where we can be incredibly effective. And that really, I think, is the point of these steps, becoming really effective. Paul, I'll tell you what a day would look like for me back when I was drinking. I would come to in the clothes I had passed out in the night before. I'd stagger into the bathroom, throw some water on my face, do some vomited calisthenics, go out to my terrible car and drive off to my terrible job, just ill and just sicker than a dog, just with my head just talking to me, about how bad it was yesterday, how bad it's going to be tomorrow. Oh, right. Finally, work would be over, and I'd beeline it to the liquor store. I'd buy a quart of vodka. I'd get home as fast as I could. I'd pour a giant glass of ice and bourbon, and I'd start drinking. And in a half an hour, I'd be drunk. In an hour, I'd be in a blackout. In an hour and a half, I would just get tongue chewing, knee walking, drunk, like really fast, and pass out.
Yeah.
Now, how helpful is that to anybody?
No.
How productive is that to anybody? How sad is that?
Amen.
And I can't tell you how much stuff is packed in to the stream of life for me today.
Yeah.
I get up early. I go to work an hour before I need to be there. I get a whole bunch of stuff done. I help all kinds of people. Then I come home. I do a bunch of work around the house. Sometimes I'll take a nap. Because I'm getting up there in age. But I'll be helpful around the house, and I've got a commitment at night. It'll be a meeting, or the phone will be ringing all day long. With work or with sponsees or whatever. And I get a lot done. I got nothing done back when I was drinking. So how do I judge my life today?
Yeah.
I judge my life in how helpful I am, how productive I am in ways that will benefit other people. That's really how I judge my life today, and it's become unbelievable. And it's not because I read a self-help book. It's because I've applied a lot of these principles for a long, long period of time, and they have fundamentally altered my character, my behavior, my thinking, my perspective, and I'm unbelievably glad that I've persevered with this stuff.
Yeah, it's good stuff. I tell you, man, I'd heard something that always rings true with me when it comes to these the 10 and 11 especially. Imagine how off the beat or how off the path we would get if we didn't have a body of work like this to do on a daily basis, right? Because it's so easy to just think, I came in here with the idea of the end game goal was to do things that made me feel better, right? And that's not always the case today, right? And having gone through this work, you start seeing wow, man, this is giving us something that, to make each day, like what you said over in step 10 where it said each day is the day where we carry the vision of God's will, right? So I didn't even have a clue what that even meant or even thought about what it meant when I got here. It's just a miracle what this stuff's done.
One of the saddest things in the world is there are a huge amount of people in a 12-step fellowship who don't avail themselves of the benefits of these steps. I can tell you there's some meetings I go to here, there, and anywhere, mm-hmm. and it will be composed a lot of people who share, and they share the problems in their life, and they share the struggles in their life, and they share the confusion in their life, and sometimes they share, the successes. But I really think the point of this whole thing is exponential spiritual growth. And you can see the people year after year after year who are just availing themselves of the fellowship, not really changing significantly year over year.
Yeah. And
then you can see the people who are being tasked by their sponsor with written evening review and, making all their amends and helping and sponsoring other people. You can see unbelievable growth in those people. So, one of the craziest things you're ever going to see is somebody in a 12-step fellowship that doesn't apply the 12 steps.
Yeah. So true. I know it doesn't say anything about it in this, but I have a group of guys, like my sponsor and me and a couple other guys. And then I got a group of sponsees that we all share a nightly review with each other. And we don't even really go over each other's. It's kind of more of like a reminder of holding keeping each other accountable. It's so easy to be like vegged out, like reading a book or something at night. And then my phone will go off and I'll have like, 2 or 3 texts where it's a bunch of different guys sending me their nightly review. It's like, oh yeah, and so, love that.
Yeah, and listen, I've always got a book of spiritual something or other opened up. Right now I'm going through really, really early Hindu texts
Nice.
because I find them incredibly interesting and very profound.
Yeah.
The Vedas,
Yeah, the Vedas,
I mean,
yeah.
really, really profound.
Yeah.
But I'm open to anything. I have the Buddhists call it a beginner's mind.
Amen.
We call it an open mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I do an enormous amount of comparative religious studies. And I'll tell you what really interests me. There's devotional, which would be like a Joel Osteen book or a C.S. Lewis book. Those are devotional.
Yeah.
And then there's critical historical stuff that is, scholarly, that really talks about the nuts and bolts of a particular spiritual tradition or religion. Those are the things that really speak to me.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've studied for 30 years now is first century Christianity. It's amazing to me that period of time and the changes that went over early Christian tradition and the power of that early Christian tradition. It went from a tiny little sect to the religion of the empire in about 250 years.
Wow.
So 300 years. So that really interests me because I see an enormous amount of power in it. And that does not mean that if you're not a Christian, you can't be totally spiritually sound. I believe let me explain spirituality and religion real quick, and then I'm gonna let you share your experience. All right, I'm 11 years old, and my parents come in and they say, "You're going to become a Methodist. We're both Methodists. Your brother and sister are Methodist. We're sending you to Sunday school, and at the end of end of those classes, you're going to be confirmed a Methodist." So I'm like, "Oh, okay." I'm 11.
Yeah.
Whatever you want. And so I go and I do it, and they teach me exactly what Methodism is about. What differentiates it from Presbyterian or Catholic or whatever. And at the end of it, they ask me. They go over the tenets. And this is what Methodists believe. Do you believe that? Yeah. Okay, you're confirmed a Methodist. They're telling me.
Yeah.
They're telling me what to believe and how to believe it.
Mm-hmm.
Spirituality is an inner personal pathway to connection with the divine. Mm. That's what spirituality is. Spirituality is something that has to speak to us, and we have to own it. So it's very personal. It can include Catholicism. It can include Judaism. It can include any of those things. Yeah. But it becomes personal. It becomes a working part of our perspective. And I'm really interested in learning more and more and more about all of that. Mm. I'm not like Bill was such a seeker. He was hanging out with Axman and Huxley and all these guys. Yeah. He was digging deep. Harry Emerson Fosdick. I mean, who's the guy that wrote the greatest secret on earth or whatever? I mean, that guy. He was so into all that stuff. And I think that's really healthy for people like us. Amen. To become interested in it. It's very comforting, mm-hmm. but also it's essential. It's essential for long-term recovery, I believe.
Amen. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I tell you, I have so much stuff that I check out on a regular basis. I love. I get into all kinds of Buddhist stuff. I've studied some of the Vedas stuff. I've studied, the Bhagavad Gita, the Hindu stuff. A lot of Buddhist stuff when I first got sober. I recently, here over the last several years, have really dived into a lot of Christianity stuff. I love Richard Rohr. I love.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, all kinds of different stuff. And I tell you, I use all of it, like I think every bit of it has so much to offer, and the weird part is I just didn't have an experience, like a personal experience with how I was raised. And the cool part is some people, it works for them, like I was raised Southern Baptist, and some people find that path and it works, like a charm for them. It just wasn't my experience, right? And the game changer, whenever I got into the big book, I could choose my own conception. It only had to make sense to me, right? And it was just a place to start. I think it was funny because sometimes when I'll share about my experience with choosing my own conception of God in the second step, there are certain people that have this idea like I'm like a build your own God type deal. And it's not really my experience, although like that can be like the beginning stage of it. But what it really turns into is you find out how you have all these old obstacles, these ideas that are standing in the way of you actually trying to form a relationship with this creator, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's crazy because like you get to have your own experience, and that's the game changer for me, and it doesn't always look, and I needed help, especially in the beginning. I needed help because I would step right over like God trying to get my attention. You get what I mean? Like clearly, like it was like something, something I should have, something was trying to get my attention and say an inward experience, my conscious, right? And like I would blame it on everyone else around me. I can't believe they're doing this or that. And it was really like, something inside of me trying to get my attention the whole time, right?
I believe it innate in human beings is a desire to know God.
Yeah.
And I think as alcoholics, I think we're unresolved mystics. I've probably said this before, but I'm going to say it again. You know what the mystics are, Paul? Those are the people that go to the mountaintop and they meditate in the cave for 4 years.
Yeah.
They're like Thomas Merton, who does 4 years of silent retreat. They go deep in because they have a real desire to know and experience God. I think to a degree, the alcoholic has that.
Yeah.
And we have a desperate desire to fill a spiritual vacancy within ourselves. Mm-hmm. Think about your experience going to the liquor store. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like I got to get to the liquor store. I got to get to the liquor store. Damn it, I'm sober. And then you start drinking, and all of a sudden it's like, ease and comfort and connection come from the alcohol. Yeah. We're driven to experience that. So I believe we're driven to experience God, whether we're conscious of it or not. And this is I think the genius of the 12-step program. Alcoholism is our problem. Spiritual living is the solution to that problem.
Yeah, seeking.
We need to fill that vacancy. You know what I'm saying, Paul?
Yeah, absolutely. It's seeking, right? Like, you do. I find through all this different literature, it's just the seeking of it that really seems like it fills that up. Especially whenever I started tapping into like this loving creator that's just almighty, that's just loves me more than I ever could love me, right? And there's so many different ways of looking at it. And also everyone's at their own stage of development, wherever they're at, whenever they're at it. It's funny because one thing the podcast really has showed me with having all these different people that I look up to, everyone that's on here, right, is that everyone has their own experience and every one of them are right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's really inappropriate and in bad taste to interfere with someone else's spiritual experience.
Amen.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Like somebody that comes up to you and goes, you're not part of my religion.
Yeah.
Well, you don't have a connection with God. Then I mean that is so in poor taste in the 12-step rooms. Yeah. Well, that's a sin that you can commit in the rooms, interfering with someone else's spiritual direction. Yeah. And but helping people out, I can't say enough for it. Now I know you go on retreats and you go to conventions and stuff. Don't you walk away with a spiritual shot in the arm?
Oh,
From
absolutely.
something like that.
A recharge, yeah, especially on some of the more intimate, all of them really, but the more intimate like men's retreats. Oh man, I was at a men's retreat probably 4 years ago, and one of the guys that spoke up they give everyone a chance to share at the end of the retreat, and one of the guys is like, my wife's like asking me when it's time to come because she loves the mood, the mood I'm in whenever I get home after I leave one of these things, right? And he was like, my wife's constantly like asking me when I'm going to my next retreat. It's funny, but you get like, for me personally, you get it like a recharge.
Yeah, there's really no doubt. And when you look back at some of the influences of Alcoholics Anonymous, some of the influences, I can see Emmett Fox as an influence.
Sure.
I can see Ed Dowling as an influence. The stuff that kind of smells Catholic in the 12 and 12. That's Ed Dowling.
Yeah.
And Bill was just open to so many different viewpoints. Somebody said that they found that Bill was a member of a church in Connecticut for a period of time. There was a Science of the Mind church.
Nice.
They remember, they remember him going there like in the 50s.
Yeah.
And so I mean, think about all that. Not being prejudiced about, or not being specific about anything, just being open to the experience. Here's something that we promise you in Alcoholics Anonymous, Paul, which is crazy. Think about this. We promise you that the actual power of God will work in and through you and do for you what you cannot do for yourself.
Thank God. Yeah.
That's a promise.
Yeah.
You don't even hear that in church. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we are not kidding with this stuff, but you have to work for it. These things will manifest, but you have to work for it.
Yeah. For me, going back to the second step where it was my own conception, that was a game changer, because the belief I had, the old idea I had when I came in here was like, if you even told me something like that, just to entertain that thought, could send me to an eternal hell, burning hell forever. So like there was a side of me that was like, are you sure about this? I've never heard this before. This kind of seems weird, But here was the weird part about it, was like, because that was an option, I was able to stay, right? It was weird. It was like, because it was like the relationship I had with whatever, concept I had of God at the time, I didn't want to have him anywhere near my life. I didn't think he wanted to have any, what does it say, that God could and would if he was sought? I thought he could, I just didn't think he would, right? And I wasn't even so sure that he could, to be honest with you. I had no experience. I liked the idea of it, and all this was just a game changer. It's cool. I mean, and also another thing is going back to those like stages of development. You take someone that's 6 months is sober, right? Just say 30 years old, six months of sobriety. Their experience with the power greater than themselves is going to be completely different than anyone else's, it's not even supposed to look the same, really, right? I mean, in my opinion,
No,
at all.
You got to start where you are. It hits you where you are, and that's the really cool thing about the book Alcoholics Anonymous. You can read it on day one, and it will mean something to you, and you can read it, in your 35th year, like I'm doing, and it's gonna even be deeper. It's like a living text. So I am I'm a big fan of the book Alcoholics Anonymous. Some of the people that I think were influential in Alcoholics Anonymous, there was a man named Glenn Clark, and he ran the camps furthest out. And I've read in different places that Bill and Bob would go to those retreats. And I've picked up some of his books. He's not really read that much anymore, but I picked up some of his books. And man, they speak to the spirituality that we're talking about, certainly from a Christian perspective, but they talk about the spirituality in a way that really resonates. One of the current authors that I really like a lot is Marcus Borg.
Oh, nice.
I
Yeah, I've listened. I've
uh,
checked some of his stuff.
yeah, The Heart of Christianity is, I think, one of the most important books of the last 30 years.
He's a theologian, right? Yeah, yeah,
University of Oregon or something like that.
yeah,
A lot of times I read, the people who are the head of a religion department at a college, just because, I know it's going to be thorough, and it's going to be something that I'm going to want to hear. I mean, people churn out books on religion. Everybody's got one book on religion in them,
yeah,
and not many of those really are something I want to mess with. But
yeah.
um, Bart Ehrman is somebody else I read a lot about.
Hmm.
I read every book Bart Ehrman ever wrote, and he was a born again Christian who turned atheist.
Hmm.
He studied the Bible so seriously that he came to the conclusion that this I'm an atheist now, but I've learned so much about Christian tradition, through his writings, because he's the head of the religion department at Chapel Hill, North Carolina,
Yeah, yeah.
and a very great writer.
Nice, nice.
So I can even learn about spirituality from the atheists.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, I'm that open-minded.
Yeah, I love what Bill C said when he said when he sat down with the sponsor. Like, it was probably the first time they really talked about God, and he said, I don't believe in the God you don't believe in either." you know,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. I heard this lady once, probably 4 or 5 years ago. She picked her 30-year chip up. She was like, "When I got here, I was a researched atheist, and I could get that, man. I get that. It's like, wow, you're going to read all these wordy books that are going to prove your side. Let's just deepen that process, right?"
What we offer you is an experience with God.
Amen.
Not a
Yeah.
theology. We offer
Amen.
you an experience. Do this stuff, and something is going to manifest. An experience is going to manifest with you.
Yeah.
And you can call that God, you can call it the Spirit, you can call it the power greater than yourself. I don't know that any of us really care what you call it, but we want you to experience it.
Yeah.
We want you to experience it, because it's going to be personal and it's going to be powerful.
Yeah. In my personal experience and opinion, God doesn't care what you call him, right? It's just my
I
understanding.
really don't think so. I
Yeah.
really don't think so.
I mean, he's
I
much
think
bigger than me.
I think most of the mess of religion, it has been created, uh, by the mess of humanity, and that's just kind of the way it is. Man is an imperfect being, and so we're gonna transfer our imperfections into whatever we do.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I think you just continue to grow and pay attention to this stuff, and spend time. You need to spend time with these religious practices, or these spiritual practices. You need to spend time with them for them to really be beneficial.
Amen. Yeah, it's good stuff. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Chris. This has been awesome. I'm going to check out this. You said Glenn Clark. I'm interested in checking him out, and then also you
Yeah.
mentioned the book God the Bestseller. I love that. I'm going to check
Oh,
that out.
yeah. So if you're reading God the Bestseller, you're going to be stumbling along until the last 2 or 3 chapters,
Okay.
where it's all about Bill Wilson.
Wow.
And then it is mind blowing.
Nice.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You are not going to find this in AA Comes of Age.
Yeah.
And Glenn Clark was very, very cool. So Glenn Clark gave a talk to a soccer team in 1900
Wow.
in Minnesota, where he explained how to be successful. And he explained that you must be free of resentments, you must be free of fears. And I'm telling you, that smelled so much like our inventory, I couldn't believe it. And it was written, and his speech was given in 1900. So I think that's where Bill got a lot of the inventory stuff from Glenn Clark.
Nice. I'm always interested in finding out. Like, I love the idea of the God, the bestseller, because I'm always interested. I'm kind of a nerd for the history of stuff. I always want to, like, I'm always curious on, because myself, I'm on this, I've been on this journey for a while, and I'm always dabbling in this or dabbling in that and all these different literatures. So to like some of this writing and stuff that Bill's done, it's like, man, I wonder what he got into, right? So I'm always interested.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, really cool. I think it's really, I love learning. Listen, I come from a family that they're all PhDs except for me. Everybody in my family is burdened with a mind. And I picked up on some of that, in my genetics, I guess. I just don't have any letters after my name.
Gotcha. Well, cool, Chris. I appreciate you, buddy. And for all the listeners, we are going to be doing, our next episode is going to be Tuesday, March 25th. We're going to be doing the first part of Step 12. We're going to break Step 12 into two different parts. What was you saying? You said the first visit, and then what was it? What would you...
So Step 12 specifically in the book Alcoholics Anonymous is how to go and find somebody to take through the steps. That's what it's about, okay? Yeah. Working with others. When all else fails, work with another alcoholic. Nothing will so much ensure immunity from alcoholism as intensive work with other alcoholics. So he broke it down basically into two visits. What do you do the first time you meet with a potential member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and what do you do the second time you meet with them? And I think that'll be something very, very interesting for us to cover.
Yeah, super excited about it, man. Appreciate you. Appreciate all the hard work you've been doing with this, man. And I tell you, like, I admire people like, guys like you that are just so involved in this stuff. Again, I'm always giving a shout out to Monty over at Take 12 Radio. For y'all that aren't aware, Chris and Monty had just got finished with a 100-part series on the language of the heart, where they break down, they go through every article in the language of the heart, which is all Bill's, not all of them, but I think it was the majority of Bill's writings from the grapevine. So I appreciate all the hard work that you've done with all this, man. And it just means so much.
Thank you, Paul. Listen, I appreciate your hard work.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So I will be talking to you again next Tuesday, buddy. Thank you so much.
Sounds good. Take care.
See you, buddy.
Hello. Thank you for listening to 3 Legacies Recovery Recordings. If you enjoy our program, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to share with a friend. We're also self-supporting, so feel free to contribute to the channel through Venmo at Recovery Recordings 615. Please note that the views expressed on this podcast are solely our individual views and do not represent any official stance of any 12-step program. We are not affiliated with any specific recovery organization, and this content should not be considered as professional advice for alcoholism or addiction.